Who should be involved in an INFF?
The INFF process is typically led by the Ministry of Planning, Finance, or the Executive Office, Office of the President, or Office of the Prime Minister. However, a wide variety of stakeholders should be involved depending on the scope and focus of the country's INFF. If the INFF is focused on a specific sector or thematic priority or financing policy area, the relevant line ministry may take a more leading role. If the INFF is focused on the subnational level, local governments will play a more central role. Overall, examples of actors that should be involved beyond those listed above include ministries of labor, environment, women and children, social services, to ensure all dimensions of sustainability are considered in the design of financing policies, national statistical offices, to integrate ongoing data and statistical capacity development initiatives within the INFF processes where relevant, private sector bodies and associations and civil society organizations, to ensure that the needs and priorities of all members of society are taken into consideration.
What is the role of the private sector in an INFF?
Private sector actors are consulted in both assessment and diagnostic exercises and in the process of designing financing policies. They're involved via coordination and dialogue mechanisms. However, the role of the private sector may change depending on the country context as well as the scope and focus of the INFF. In addition, they may choose to take a more integrated approach to their own decision-making processes and apply the guiding principles of an INFF in their day-to-day operations to guide investment choices.
What is the role of civil society organizations in an INFF?
Civil society organizations, CSOs, have a dual role in INFFs. On the one hand, they are among the stakeholders consulted and involved in the design and implementation of the country's INFF. For example, they should be involved in informing financing needs assessments and binding constraints diagnostics, as well as the design of specific financing policy solutions. On the other hand, they hold government and other finance providers to account with regard to commitments in the INFF and the specific objectives identified in the country's financing strategy. See Building Block 4 Governance and Coordination for examples of how CSOs have played this role in different countries.
What are the costs of operationalizing an INFF?
Operationalizing an INFF requires resources and commitment from government. The specific resource requirements will depend on the scope of the INFF that's adopted and the country's baseline, of course. The scoping that's typically done in the inception phase can give you an idea of what the required steps are and also the resources that may be required and the budgeting that has to be dedicated to this. This scoping exercise can also be used to identify additional assessments and diagnostics that need to be undertaken, and those that may have to be carried out or whose cost might have to be covered by development partners. In the assessment and diagnostic phase, and in the process of articulating a financing strategy, there are also opportunities to highlight other areas where support from development partners may be required. Currently, UN agencies are supporting INFF processes in over 80 countries.
Can an INFF be implemented in countries emerging from or in crisis?
Yes, indeed. The INFF provides a framework to strengthen government capacity to design and implement coherent financing policies, and that can be implemented with different levels of ambition. The overall approach and the core principles in INFFs are widely applicable, and they can be adopted to different degrees, guided by the needs, capacities, and the baseline in each country. INFF guidance reflects on the typical challenges that countries in different situations may face when they embark on an INFF. That can include insufficient data, weak governance, capacity limits, or resource limitations, and also includes advice on how these can be overcome. Additional work is also being undertaken in the UN to further expand on what the INFF approach looks like in different country contexts based on initial experiences. So that would include countries such as LDCs, the least developed countries, small island developing states, and other vulnerable countries.
How are inclusion, gender equity, climate, and other cross-cutting priorities mainstreamed in the INFF methodology?
All dimensions of sustainability, that's economic, social, and environmental issues, are embedded in the INFF approach. One way to make sure that these principles are also lived in practice is to involve ministries that are responsible for these priorities within the INFF governance arrangements, so that these voices can be heard from the beginning. The INFF guidance also provides examples on how these different priorities can be mainstreamed in financing policy choices and in financing strategies.
What is the relationship between an INFF and national planning processes?
National planning processes, whether related to entire national development plans or sectoral or thematic strategies, provide the goals and priorities that form the basis for the INFF process. An INFF helps government more effectively finance national goals and priorities identified via national planning processes. As such, while it can help identify areas to prioritize in terms of resource mobilization, the INFF is not a tool to help define what national development goals and priorities should be.
Is the INFF going to replace a country's budgeting approaches, such as program-based budgeting?
No, the aim of the INFF is not to replace existing systems and processes related to different areas of financing policies, such as government finance and private investment. Rather, it can be used to enhance integrations across them, serving as the docking stations for a variety of tools and methodologies already in use, as well as those offered by development partners.
Can the INFF help solve practical problems that hinder a country's ability to mobilize the required financing for sustainable development?
The INFF can help identify opportunities and underlying obstacles related to a country's ability to mobilize and use financing effectively. In doing so, it can help countries identify resource and capability gaps as well as policy solutions. Thus, the INFF goes beyond being a high-level theoretical process. However, the guidance on INFFs does not aim to provide solutions to countries implementing capability issues, such as dual budget processes, weak project appraisal capability, lacking debt management functions.